Chapter 10, I am the resurrection. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. Helen Keller. So far, I have described 3 realms that make up what I believe is the essence of who we are. I understand that the fictional realm only exists in the mind and that the mind is a small part of the consciousness that manifested when the spiritual realm merged with the physical realm. I have no idea if the mind is a result of biochemical reactions in the brain or if it's a result of our interaction with our spirit. Perhaps it is a combination of both. I don't know, and I work hard to answer those questions. This chapter is my exploration of who I am and my relationships with all aspects of my being. I will be the first to admit that exploring the spiritual realm is very difficult. After all, how can I have a relationship with something that I did not see or believe in for 35 years of my life? Science focuses on the physical realm almost exclusively, as their primary tenet is observation. The scientists have come up with some absolutely brilliant and ingenious devices, techniques, and technology in order to accomplish that task. The mind is absolutely brilliant when it is put to work in this way. I know for a fact that I've benefited from that genius as I sit here writing a book on the laptop that will be read by people all over the world due to the black swan we call the internet, using power from my solar system in a house that has no gas-burning fireplace but instead captures and stores heat from the sun. I have read and seen individuals involved in the scientific community express that the deeper they dig, the more spiritual they become. They talk about how science has peered so far into the cosmos and so deep into the structure of atoms that their work is starting to morph into philosophy. There comes a point where science ends and philosophy must take over, for I believe science can only explain all that is physical within the physical realm. At some point, the lines start to blur at the edges of the physical realm as they realize spirit is behind the veil. That is okay for me, as I can accept the importance and limitations of science. I grew up most of my life with a complete faith in science, and that I felt all the answers to life could be found there. I have since discovered that life is far more than what can be explained in the physical realm, and in about 2004, I started exploring other, more philosophical approaches to explain what life was all about. I had a feeling there was way more to life, but for some reason I couldn't physically explain what I was feeling. What I'm sharing in this book is nothing more than my own experience and my own way of explaining what I feel, see, think, and believe. As with everything in life, it still comes down to the individual taking responsibility and embarking on their own journey of discovery. A few hundred years ago, a man by the name of Leonardo da Vinci contemplated the essence of man when he drew this famous Vitruvian Man. And there's a graphic of the Vitruvian Man, as I'm sure you've all seen. Even though Da Vinci drew this to highlight the physical proportions of man, what I find very exciting was that I see more in this picture than just the physical. What I found very interesting is that this drawing shows 2 bodies in a circle and a square, which could also represent the physical and the spiritual. So if the physical body is merged with the spirit, how do the 2 bodies communicate with one another? What is the relationship and how far does this interaction go? I had to meditate on these questions as I did not know how to explain what I felt or saw. What came to me was to show this relationship not from the front, as Da Vinci did with his Vitruvian Man, but rather from the side. I introduced this concept already in chapter 6 when I talked about the difference between spirit, man, human, and person. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Genesis 1:26. And then there's a graphic, the illustration 13, man created in the image of God. It's just 2 silhouette men facing each other with the heart and the brain both highlighted. And you've got a Vesica Pisces in the far left field. There's the physical. On the far right, you have the spiritual, so that's the two men. And then in the center, where the two men meet, it is mental and emotional. This came with some profound implications for me as I realized that as a spiritual being, I'm a child of the Creator. And when the physical body was formed, it was formed in the image of our spirit, our own image. The spirit is the driving force behind the manifestation of all matter. So when the physical body was made, it took on the image of the spirit, for the spirit is the driving force behind the animation of the physical material. Without spirit, the flesh could not do or be anything. I see my relationship with the Creator as a very intimate connection with God's source energy. That relationship can be demonstrated using a very cool technology where scientists use lasers to create three-dimensional holographic images inside crystal. You can spin the crystal around to see the image from any angle. What most people don't realize is that if you break that crystal, the image remains intact in each fragment. The image is not lost at all, but duplicated in all the pieces. I view my relationship with the Creator in much the same way. I see no reason to discount the idea that God wanted to have children. As a dutiful parent, his offspring respond by giving up a piece of himself, and that is what I believe is the essence of our spirit. We are not the Creator, but we are an important part of the Creator, as we were created in his image and are his children. For me, with Scripture talking about man being created in our image, viewing who we are in this way makes sense for me, and I find great comfort in being able to have that type of a relationship with the Creator. As a parent, I am absolutely convinced that he is putting us through school right now so that we can learn how to be conscious, self-governing, responsible, accountable adults. It is our job to learn how to have healthy relationships in order for us to graduate from these school lessons. So, how does the physical body communicate with the spiritual body? I ran into the work of Sabrina Reber, not sure how to pronounce that, the author of Raise Your Vibration, a compilation of spiritual wisdom to help activate and integrate the Christ consciousness within. She explains that the 7 chakras are the 7 trumpets as described in Revelations. I found the idea intriguing and yet missing something. There is still only one body in her picture, and it doesn't really explain the relationship between the physical and spiritual body. So I decided to take her work one step further. Here is a simple portrayal of a trumpet. If we had only a single body, it would look something like this. Illustration 14, representation of a trumpet. It's just a 2-line silhouette, trumpet shape, funnel shape on its side. Very simple. When I drew this picture, I quickly realized that the horn is only half the image, and that is why I knew Sabrina was missing something. I saw that if you placed the horns together, small ends butted up, the horns form a tunnel. Since we're dealing with 2 bodies here, physical and spiritual, we must account for 2 trumpets, one from each. When I put the trumpets together, it seemed natural to close the ends together. And the 2 trumpets fitted together, small ends facing each other, it forms a tunnel that's wider at the ends and skinnier in the middle. Like 2 half circles, one above and one below. When I drew this picture, I quickly realized that the horn is only half of the image. Oops, I already read that part. Sorry. When you close the loop on the 2 trumpets, there's this picture here with two oblong ovals, one above and one below. It's called closing the loop on the 2 trumpets. To complete the diagram, it was a simple matter of connecting the lines to form a torus. Imagine, if you can, a multidimensional portal or tunnel at each chakra point so that the spiritual body can connect, communicate, and share information and energy with our physical body. Lots of people talk about opening up our chakras. And for me, I really struggled with this concept until I realized that if these tunnels were blocked, energy and information could not flow back and forth. Our spiritual body would then be cut off or restricted from our physical body. The physical body would then be left up to its own capabilities to deal with this world and the realities within it. The implication of this is that an interdimensional spirit can interact with a three-dimensional body through wormholes in space-time and allow energy, thoughts, and feelings to flow back and forth. We cannot see this, but I believe we can definitely feel it happening. As we discipline the mind and focus on our feelings and get in touch with the true essence of who we are, I believe we can then start to have a much more meaningful relationship with our spirit and have our spirit guide us through the more advanced lessons that we have yet to experience. The trick is to maintain the balance between the physical and spiritual bodies, and that is where the Christ consciousness comes in. The Christ consciousness is primarily about love and being centered and balanced. Christ knew that there was a duality at play, and many of his teachings were there to help us recognize this duality and come to terms with it. The duality between the physical body and the spirit is lost on most of us right now because we are so consumed and blinded by the fictions that we have manifested in our lives. That is why he said in Matthew 22:21, "Then saith he unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." He knew that all things fiction belong to the fiction. Caesar is a representation of the fiction. However, everything in the physical and spiritual realms belong to God. And as such, knowing the truth and maintaining that balance is critical should we wish to enter the kingdom of God. The duality between the physical and the spiritual realms is a huge part of our lessons here on earth. For the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary the one to the other. Galatians 5:17. The Christ impulse is to find a balance between the two, for the merging of the two is what created the man and is the source of our consciousness. We need both, but my priority is to ensure decisions are made through spirit. I know that my physical body has a finite life and understanding, so I work hard not to succumb to the needs of the flesh at the risk of my spirit. That's my biggest challenge as a narrator. So how do I lead myself by the spirit rather than the flesh? The intellect of the physical body is, for the most part, centered in the brain. Yes, there are other places on the body that have brain cells and cellular memory as well. But for the purposes of this discussion, I want to focus on the physical intellect, the mind. This mind is a very good memory storage device, calculator, and evaluator. It can question, ponder, create, imagine, and evaluate. The sciences are a testament to the power of our intellect. We need the intellect to solve many technical problems that are rooted in the physical realm. It allows us to work through many challenges in our lives. However, it is limited to the physical realm, and as such, makes decisions without any consultation with the spirit. I lived many years of my life completely dependent on the intellect, and it was a living hell. It took me many years to realize that my feelings, separate from emotion, were an important factor to consider when making decisions. But what are feelings all about? If we contemplate the idea that the torus, If we contemplate the idea that the torus is a multidimensional gateway to our spirit, and that feelings are the spirit's way of communicating with the physical body, then why not utilize that conduit when making decisions in our lives? To utilize these conduits to spirit, that motivated me to make sure that my chakras were in balance too. They are all important, but the heart chakra, the middle of the 7 chakras, is where we can balance them all. When I draw out the picture where we center ourselves between the physical and the spiritual and balance ourselves between the 7 chakras, we find a stunning image appears. The cross that we all must bear if we want to graduate life with honors. I guess I'm going to have to show this graphic instead of just trying to describe it. I'm so sorry, guys, this atrocious way of showing a graphic. One day maybe I'll get equipment, or maybe somebody better than me will do a redo of this audiobook. Okay. This is the representation of a centered individual in balance in expressing the Christ consciousness within themselves. the real cool thing about this is that when we balance the chakras and open them up, we will find the heart chakra opens up even more so that we can then gain access to the spirit's mind, which can also be called the universal consciousness. The heart is the gateway to the spiritual universal mind and where our attachment to each other resides. Here is where the universal feeling of brotherhood comes from, because we are all attached to the universal mind while we are also experiencing our individuality. I believe that is why Christ is always portrayed with the image of a heart on his chest. When we open the heart and learn how to feel and listen to the heart, we can then start accessing the universal knowledge that we have been cut off from for our whole entire life. Making decisions using the universal mind, rooted in love, then resolves a lot of problems we face here in the physical realm. I just want to throw in a little aside here, as you know, just for myself. He's calling it the universal mind, but if I was referring to my conceptualization, I would call it the holy mind, because universal tends to have like a certain connotation to it, in Western culture at least, and probably in Eastern culture too. It has an indiscriminate type of connotation to it, and I've discovered that the mind of God, or the Holy Spirit, is very discriminate, and it's not all encompassing. I mean, it is in a way, but not, there's things that are excluded, So anyway, I just wanted to mention that there's a difference between his description and the way that I conceptualize it. Anyway, I place the devil within our physical mind, as I believe the energy of the resistance and temptation is within our physical mind. That is why it is so important to train hard to have the discipline so that we can command the mind and not succumb to the temptations we face in the physical realm. Being lost in the mind also makes it very difficult to hear or feel what the heart is trying to say. There's a lot of duality in life that needs to be addressed and balanced. Just as we need to find balance between the physical and spiritual, we also need to balance the masculine and feminine, night and day, up and down, summer and winter, life and death, love and fear, etc. Part of the Christ consciousness is to find a balance between all these dualities in our lives and find ways to go with the ebbs and flows of the natural cycles we find in the physical realm. The challenge most of us will have is recognizing that the balance must start within ourselves first. Let's take the masculine and feminine as an example. I think most of us would recognize that all our current systems are built with masculine energy. What characteristics do we associate with that energy? Some common words or concepts to explain the masculine may be as a provider, protector, or hunter, driven outside of the individual and focused, where the feminine is related to nurturing, caring, birthing, focused inward and inside the individual. Females have a very strong propensity for expressing the feminine energy, where males have a strong masculine energy. However, each individual has both within themselves, and I believe our goal is to bring these two energies into balance within ourselves. I think that's just me personally, the narrator. I think that's actually accomplished through marriage and being a team like that. But, there's probably some level that you can do that within yourself as well, especially if you're not married. Okay, so I was an extreme masculine individual for most of my life. So much so, I rejected completely the idea of being a nurturing, caring individual. I rejected all feelings, suppressed them at all costs, essentially rejecting the spiritual and emotional aspects of my being, focusing only on the physical and mental. I was taught that men don't cry. I dove into the intellect to completely avoid feelings at all costs. Any expression of caring or feelings resulted in me feeling very uncomfortable, so I would do anything to avoid any situations that result in those feelings being expressed. I have to do an aside here. There's a Pink Floyd song I think a lot of us might know. Feelings. Showing feelings of an almost human nature. This will not do, right? Because we don't want to answer to worm, Your Honor. That's what it is. Anywho, it cut off the heart completely. I often would use emotional outbursts like anger, guilt, or shame to mask or cover the feelings. I found through my recovery process that getting in touch with my feelings and learning how to express them in a healthy way was a huge revelation for me. I figured out that men do cry and that it is okay for men to cry. It is also acceptable that men have feelings and can express them to other people, no matter who they are. The process of learning how to express the feminine energy within myself saved my life. I realize now that it is important that each of us know how to express both the masculine and the feminine so that we can bring these into balance within. This is not a black and white type of situation we find ourselves in. Some males are very masculine and others are very feminine. Within the male organism, it is our job to bring these into balance. Just as there are females who are very feminine and others who are very masculine, they too will find it important to bring those energies into balance too. When I found the balance, I was more capable of having a healthy relationship with my wife. She too found that balance within herself, and as a result, we can now have the masculine and feminine energies flow much more easily within ourselves and between each other. When those energies are out of balance within a relationship, the relationship suffers. We were able to successfully break the paradigm models that were holding us from fully expressing and exploring who we are. Now that we have done that, the energy is no longer blocked and it flows easier. There are some days where I am more masculine than feminine, and there are other days when I am more feminine than masculine. The real comforting thing is that it is okay to have these ebbs and flows within myself. I now find great comfort living within the natural flow and allowing myself to be able to experience both. To find the balance of the Christ consciousness within ourselves, it will require that each of the dualities we face in our lives will need to be confronted and addressed. Finding a way to have a healthy relationship with the paradoxes in our lives is part of the challenge and the duty while we are here. We can choose one side or the other and become complacent, or we can choose to ride the waves and explore these paradoxes and what they really mean to ourselves and our existence. There is one truth that I've learned that reminds me that I am still a child and that I have much to learn. The truth is that the more I learn, the less I know. What that means is that as I open new doors of knowledge and understanding, a whole new world opens up, which would require many lifetimes to explore. The reality is, I'm nowhere close to fully learning or experiencing the full scope of who I am, my relationship with myself, the Creator, or others. As a result, I realize that it is not humanly possible for me to fully express or communicate all that I am, since I have no idea the full scope of who I am due to the limits of the physical vessel. As I explored already, I know that I am not a person or human. Now I realize that the full scope of who I am is not man either. To use words to describe something diminishes that which we attempt to describe due to the limitation of words. All I can really do to express who I am is to use the words that God used while he was talking to Moses. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. Exodus 3:13. In the diagram below, I represent all the unknowns with all the question marks. When I draw a circle around it, I get closer to being able to describe or express who I am. I believe it also comes closer to what Christ has been trying to teach us to accept. The challenge is that our mind and our physical bodies can be a huge temptation and distraction from what our spirit is working on accomplishing. The 3 temptations of Christ is a perfect example of how these temptations can come into play. I will be blunt here. The devil is not some 3-dimensional apparition that appears, but rather is the mind itself playing tricks on us. What was required to not fall for these temptations was mental discipline and a firm command and knowledge of self. If we are going to be able to command the physical mind, then it is important that we have the training to ensure that the mind does our bidding rather than the other way around. Just a quick little aside, it's not a big deal at all, but I think that there is the devil that he's talking about that's within the mind. I think that's referred to as the flesh in Scripture. And I think that there is a fallen angel that is outside of us, that's its own entity, that is also the devil. That it's the devil, a different type of devil. So I think there's a couple of different kinds here, but he's just addressing the one that is within our flesh. Okay, that's my perspective. Okay. When Christ was tempted by the devil, he issued a simple command: go away. And that allowed him to avoid the temptations. How many of us have that level of discipline to be able to control our minds in such a way? The idea of the I am in the Christ consciousness is not new. I believe Christ first taught us this in his teachings. I don't feel that we're supposed to turn Christ into a deity and worship him much like those who participate with organized religions do today. I feel that Christ was showing us how to accomplish ascension, and in order to do so, it requires a lot of work and tribulation. Christ saved us once already through his own sacrifice and experiences of death, resurrection, and ascension. It is now our turn to save ourselves by following his example and duplicating the process. Just waiting around and praying is not going to result in being saved. We need to get off our asses and get to work so that we can accomplish what we came here to do. Exploring who we are and stepping into our power as the I am is the doorway. Once we recognize the true nature of the I am and learn about who we truly are, the passages below take on a whole new meaning. I am the bread of life, John 6:35. I am the light of the world, John 8:12. I am the door of the sheep, John 10:7. I am the good shepherd, John 10:11. I am the way, the truth, and the life, John 14:6. I am the resurrection, John 11:25. Now we have a graphic, illustration 20, representation of the full scope of I am. Gonna have to show you like this. Let's see. Oh, it's just terrible. You can see what that looks like. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I don't think he meant that we bow to him, but rather follow his example. I think it's probably both, but I'm not the author. Okay. To bow down to him would be a violation of God's first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Exodus 23. The word gods is defined as judges, rulers, divine ones. As we are all divine in our own right, would that be enough to convince most that participating in the fiction and worshiping Christ, or anybody else for that matter, be enough to violate this commandment? After all, Christ did come to make being human divine. As I have said before, the physical body is mortal, the spirit is immortal. Due to the immortality of the spirit, it cannot die, but it does experience jeopardy when it lives here in this physical realm. Well, I don't know, narrators aside about the spirit cannot die. Yeah, the spirit that originates with the Creator cannot die, but the soul can die, because the Bible says the soul that sinneth, it shall die. But it's I personally am not super clear on the distinctions between the soul and the spirit. I think the soul is like our personality, or it's related to that in a way that the spirit isn't. I don't know. Anyway, when the physical body stops functioning, the spirit is then released into the spiritual realm and is free to then have another physical experience. Some would call this reincarnation. I do believe that what happens here can have an impact on the spirit. We need that jeopardy in order to take this experience seriously. How else can an immortal spiritual being learn how to have empathy, love, and compassion if it does not experience what it's like to be mortal and experience the opposite? There are many stories in our culture where immortal beings go through this experience and it humbles them. So what is the difference between spirit and soul? See, this is what we were talking about. I don't know, man. I see the soul as being the result of the physical and the spirit joining and manifesting our current consciousness. Yeah, probably. Just as that union produced man, it also produced the soul, which is the consciousness of that man. Ah, okay, that makes sense. I believe that this results in a unique experience each time we reincarnate, as it allows us to experience and witness something different each time. The current manifestation of man and soul is the unique merging of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of being for this one unique lifetime. It sounds like he believes in like automatic, ongoing, eternal reincarnation. And that might be the case, but that's not my take whenever I study the scriptures. The kind of I get the feeling that there's only this one and then the next one. And that might be something that is cyclical, but I kind of don't feel like it is. Like that's just my conviction right now. I feel like it's just one, this fallen manifestation that we have, and then the next one will be eternal. The Bible seems to say to me that the next one is eternal. And I don't know if that means that we come in and out of flesh or what, but I don't think it's just eternally cyclical, at least at my point of maturity right now. Okay. The current manifestation of man and soul is the unique merging of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of being for this one unique lifetime. Ego. The ego, or I, is the self-awareness that each of us experiences in our lives and is a reflection of the manifestation of the soul during the merging of the physical and spiritual. I reject the idea that it is our job to kill the ego. I think that there is a huge misconception of what the word ego means. I get the sense that most people associate an out-of-control mind with the word ego. Yeah, because that's how it's used in language so much in just in daily life, you know. That being somebody who is selfish and egotistical. Yeah, because that's how it's used, out of context a lot. Instead, I want to get to the root of the ego word meaning I, the conscious, self-aware, thinking individual. My goal is not to kill the ego, but rather to celebrate it and recognize the significance of that achievement and how divine it really is. I do want to confront being selfish or egotistical, as those are all rooted in the intellect, where the devil can tempt us. But that is very different than killing the I. Teachers like Christ, Muhammad, Buddha, etc. have all attempted to teach us these important lessons. The organized religions that built up around their teachings would suggest that we all believe we are sinners and we are all going to hell should we not follow the dogma of the church. Steiner, Leo Tolstoy, and others have helped me shed the dogma of religion and come to terms with who I really am and how important, unique, and divine I am. Equally important is to recognize that each and every single individual on this planet are equally unique, important, and divine. I am the resurrection, John 11:25. The dogma of religion would suggest that Jesus Christ is the resurrection. However, I'm not entirely convinced that is true. The word I comes from the Greek word ego, which means I, me, my. The word am comes from the Greek word I, me, or ei, me, which means to be, to exist, to happen, to be present. Given the context of all that I wrote so far, would it be safe to conclude that if I shed the fictional realm and embrace all that I am and accept that I exist, have I not done what Christ asked of us? And as a result, I ended up resurrecting myself? I believe that is to be the case. If we accept the concept and then choose to permit that higher level of consciousness to permeate and meld with our own consciousness, a marriage of sorts where we are the bride, then we can then start duplicating what he did.